Are you frugal over 50? Or do you wonder what it's going to be like to be frugal and over 50? In this video, I'm going to answer your questions about what it's like to live frugally over 50. And stick around to the very end for a very special quote that you do not want to miss. Welcome, I'm Amy, and here at Frugal Over 50, I give you tips and tools for frugal living. Hola a todos! El día de hoy voy a responder sus dudas acerca de la vida frugal para los que tenemos más de 50 años de edad. I want to thank you for sending in such great questions. Question number 1. Why do some people view frugality as a bad thing? Now, answering as a person over 50 and just for myself, I can say that sometimes frugality can feel like a bad thing because it can feel like I am denying myself things that I actually need just in order to keep food on the table and a roof over my head. And I think that sometimes we view frugality as a bad thing because we get a little confused in our minds between what counts as frugal living and what we are experiencing as poverty or as some kind of diminished economic circumstances that just makes it really generally harder to get through life. And there really is a difference. Frugality, as Bola Sukumbi of Clever Girl Finance has told us, is the act of being very intentional with your spending. And it's so much easier to be intentional about your spending if you have more money to be intentional with. In the case where our economic circumstances are extremely difficult, frugality in and of itself won't solve all of those problems, but it will at least give us clarity and give us ways that we can think about how to move ahead. Number 2, at least one person wanted to know what money mistakes I make as a woman over 50 who claims to be frugal. I make money mistakes all the time, and I thought I would illustrate this by telling you a little bit about a haircut that I got a few months ago. I recently moved to a large city, and there are places here where you can get a really fancy haircut. And I thought, I'd like to get a fancy haircut. I haven't had a fancy haircut ever. And so I arranged for the appointment. I went to the haircut. The hairstylist did not listen to what I wanted, did not pay attention to what my hair is actually like, paid no attention to what my actual lifestyle is, and cut my hair in such a way that it is still trying to figure itself out. I have since gone back to the cheap chain place, found a great hairstylist, and she's in the process of fixing it for me. And she says that by summertime, in other words, in another few months from when I'm recording this video, it's actually going to be where I want it to be. The much more expensive haircut, which cost more than twice as much as the cheap haircut plus a generous tip, was a money mistake of looking at the shiny thing and the more expensive thing. That was a money mistake that really illustrates something that I fall prey to, which is things might be going just fine, and I want to try something new. And instead of thinking, how could I try something new without spending any more money, I go for the shiny thing and the more expensive thing, and then I end up regretting it a lot. And it's definitely a pattern I'll be arguing with myself about for the rest of my life. Number 3, do I still use You Need a Budget? It's a really very pertinent question because I recently revamped how I'm using YNAB so that it makes more sense for how my finances work right now. There was a time period where I was mostly looking at the larger expenses related to moving, in which I didn't find the super detailed version of a YNAB budget that I had used for years very helpful anymore. And I recently went back to it and I set it up differently than I used to. So instead of having everything in one YNAB budget, I now run 4 different YNAB budgets for different parts of my financial life, and they all come under my same account. I can just go into my YNAB account and then I can click on which budget I want to look at. I find that that works really well for me right now, and it's helped me to get even more clear about my finances. So I'm actually really happy with You Need a Budget. So yes, I am still using You Need a Budget. I have a whole budgeting series that I'll link above and down below if you're interested in knowing a little bit about how I budget and how I recommend that you budget. So if you want to try it, you can get 34 days free with my link below in the description. If you want to try something else or talk about your own budget, tell us down below in the comments. Number 4, some of you have asked, how has my frugal journey been? And I will respond in 2 ways. First of all, I created a video in Spanish, en español, explaining a bit about my journey and why it is that I talk about frugal living right now. I'll link that video up above and also down below in the description. And I hope that you'll go and check it out. Even if you don't speak Spanish, I provided English subtitles, and it gives sort of a biographical history of my life with frugal living in Spanish. And I will also say that I was raised with values of frugal living, and so frugal living has been with me throughout my whole life. My choice to live frugally came right before I turned 50 and right around the time that I started my YouTube channel. Because before that I was trying to live frugally, but between starting the YouTube channel and starting to use You Need a Budget, I learned to look at my financial life and my spending life and my frugal life through a lens of empowerment and through a lens of moving forward in my own life and for my own goals. Are you naturally frugal, or is this something that you struggle with? I had frugal living kind of imposed upon me as a value when I was a child, but then I had to relearn it and take it on as a value as a middle-aged woman because I had to think of it in terms of the life I was living then. By the way, if you're getting value out of this video, would you give it a like and consider subscribing if you haven't done so already? And if you'd like to contribute to the growth of the channel, click the link below for coffee, where you can make a one-time contribution or you can become a monthly member. Number 5, one of our viewers asked, how does life look and feel without debt? And this is one that I'm bringing up to the community. For those of you who live without debt, would you be willing to come and tell us down below in the comments anything that you'd like to about living without debt? It's easy for us in the frugal living community to talk about debt as if it were some sort of a moral failing or a choice that we made to spend money that we didn't have on things that we didn't really need. And often that's just not a realistic picture. We got into debt because we had things that we absolutely needed in order to sustain our lives, and we had to rely on credit in order to obtain those things, whether it was healthcare or education, particularly in the United States, housing, anywhere in the world, other kinds of large expenses that really keep our basic needs fulfilled. We can end up going into debt and then having to pay that off carefully and possibly quite slowly over the remainder of our working lives. What it feels like to be without that is something I'd love to have you folks discuss in the comments. Tell me about it. Number 6, someone asked, what is a frugal habit that I used to have but I abandoned, and why? The first thing that came to mind for me was meal planning. I talk about meal planning quite a bit here on the channel. In fact, if you watch my videos regularly, you may be surprised to hear me say that I abandoned meal planning. Well, my life changed quite a bit when my years of raising children came to an end, and I suddenly thought, I don't know if I need to meal plan as strictly as I used to. I wonder if I could just buy my staples and see how my budget does, track my spending later instead of planning in advance. And for a time, that really worked. And that was the reason that I abandoned it, so to speak, is that I really had a routine that was fine and functional, and I didn't so much need to write it down anymore. But then, starting about a year ago, where I live, and probably around most of the world that time, food prices started to go up and household goods prices started to go up. And I have noticed over the past year that my spending has been creeping up, and I've had difficulty keeping track of what is the best value at the grocery store these days. And I have decided that that reason for abandoning meal planning, which is that I was in a groove and didn't need to, is no longer relevant. And so I am going to go back to meal planning. Starting in April, I'm going to be doing a weekly meal plan. So thank you for that question, because it got me to thinking, and now I'm going to be getting back into meal planning. Number 7, what is something that I love to splurge on? This is an interesting question because the word splurge was really never in my vocabulary growing up. And then as an adult, I never really took on what the word splurge might mean to me. And so I had to give it some thought. And I think splurge for me means spending some money indulgently, possibly if I have prepared for it, but sometimes on impulse, but knowing that I have the financial resources to really absorb that little extra expense. And I think my favorite splurge recently was a cookie decorating kit that I saw and I bought on impulse at Target. So I spent a couple of hours one afternoon listening to an audiobook and just playing around with decorating this cookie house and these little cookie bunnies. I have almost zero artistic inclination or talent, but it was a really fun splurge and it gave me an afternoon's fun. And the cookie house seems to be doing fine. I'll probably keep it up for another couple of weeks. So it was a fun little splurge that I could easily absorb into my household budget. It gave me hours of enjoyment, and it's helping to decorate my kitchen. Number 8, what is my skincare routine? As a woman over 50, I think about my skincare routine. If you're a woman over 50, you probably do too. I get asked this a lot, and most recently I talked about it in my Frugal Luxuries video, which I'll link above and down below. And in a little bit more detail, I'll say that my frugal skincare routine starts with doing my very best to get enough sleep. If you're a woman over 50, you know that can be a real challenge. And so it is a priority to me as much as it can be. Also, drinking enough water is super important, and it does help to hydrate the skin. I also use collagen peptides in my coffee in the morning, and that is supposed to help with skin and joints. Do we know if it works? I don't know, that's why I use it. And I have my two skincare products, my CeraVe moisturizing cream and my Curology skincare that has tretinoin in it. It's sort of simple and straightforward. I also have a camera that really likes to make faces look fantastic. And I have a ring light and I'm sitting next to a window. So anything that you see here that you like is just as much about this beautiful camera that I'm working with. Thank you, YouTube, for helping me purchase this camera, as it is about my skincare routine. But it is something that I care about, and so thank you for asking. Number 9, one viewer wanted to know, what is frugality like where I live? This is such an interesting question because I recently moved from a small town where I had lived for 25 years. It was in a very remote location. And frugality there had to do largely with making do with what you have, making your items last as long as possible, and knowing that resources might not be abundant all of the time. Then I moved to a large metropolitan area where resources are quite abundant. And what I've noticed that frugality looks like here for people who've lived here a long time is they may have abundant economic resources and they end up donating a whole lot of stuff to thrift stores. So where I used to not be able to find very much at thrift stores because everybody just kept everything, here I can go to a thrift store and find a whole lot of stuff. So my frugal life looks a little bit different here because I can access new to me frugal items in a way that I couldn't when I lived in a small remote community. I think there are benefits to both strategies, both the use it until you can't use it anymore. And I also think there's a benefit really to having enough economic resources that you can afford to either give something to the thrift store or go and shop at the thrift store. Number 10, are frugal people happy? I sometimes go on Google Scholar and look up studies on frugal living, and there are very, very few. In fact, one of the few studies that I found commented on the lack of studies of frugality and frugal living. And it seems that most of the conversation around frugal living is informal and among us, which is fine, but I would love to see some research on the impact of frugal living on an individual's happiness, maybe on a community's happiness, on a company's happiness, etc. My personal thought on this, and maybe I'll call this a preliminary hypothesis, is that there are probably people who live frugally out of necessity, and they are really struggling economically, and they are probably not super thrilled about having to be as frugal as they are. There are probably other people who live with abundant economic resources and are still frugal and maybe struggling for other reasons. So as a person who sometimes struggles with the concepts and feels a little bit of discomfort in the growth along the frugal path, I'm not sure I can say frugal equals happy 100% of the time. But if you are a PhD candidate looking for a research project and this sounds good to you, I want you to do your PhD on this and then share it with the world. Let's research it, let's study it, let's bring out its benefits everywhere. In the musical You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, there's a song called Happiness. And as our quote today, I want to share a little bit of that song with you. It starts out like this. Happiness is 2 kinds of ice cream, finding your skate key, telling the time. And then the whole song goes on with a list of all of the small things that make us happy in life. The song ends with this. 'Cause happiness is anyone or anything at all that's loved by you. As we keep pondering the questions of frugal living, take that next step in your journey and know that you are not alone, and I am so proud of you. Live frugally, change your life, and together we will change the world. I can't wait to see you again soon. Nos vemos pronto. Bye!